So imagine you're staring at a text message you just typed out.
Right. Your thumb is like hovering right over the send button.
Exactly. You want to send it immediately. I mean, every instinct in your body is just screaming at you to fire it off.
Oh, sure.
But instead, you force yourself to set the phone down on the counter. And you just walk away.
You deliberately decide to wait.
Yeah, you wait 20 minutes, maybe even an hour before you reply. And like, why do you do that?
Right, because you aren't actually busy.
No, you're just staring at the wall. But you wait because, well, whether you realize it or not, you are actively participating in a high-stakes game of psychological warfare.
Yeah.
You are modulating your availability to signal higher social value because your social survival, your romantic prospects, your position in the hierarchy, they all literally depend on these tiny calculated delays.
And I think the really fascinating part is that almost no one likes to admit they are playing that game.
No, never.
We like to tell ourselves that human interaction is, organic, that we're just being authentic.
Right, just being ourselves.
Exactly. But beneath that polite veneer, there is this pervasive, invisible architecture governing every single interaction. We are constantly calculating risk, reward, and leverage.
Which is exactly what we are stripping down today. So welcome to a deep dive that is going to completely rewire how you view basically every room you walk into.
It really will.
We are unpacking this massive, comprehensive set of research notes simply titled Psychology, Social Behavior, Politics, and Elections.
Yeah, it's a huge collection.
It really is. And our mission for you listening right now is to decode how human beings actually behave when the prize on the line is social, emotional, reputational, or, political.
We're taking the cold, hard logic of game theory,
Right.
which is usually reserved for economics and like nuclear deterrence, and we are applying it to everyday popularity, power, and influence.
Yeah, because game theory is usually math on a chalkboard, right? It's prisoner's dilemmas, corporate strategy, algorithmic trading. But today, we are looking at game theory with lip gloss on. We are looking at a world where the calculation is hidden right behind a smile.
And to do that effectively, the source material uses a brilliant conceptual lens.
Yeah, I love this part.
Right. Rather than just giving us dry mathematical formulas or abstract behavioral models, the authors constructed this metaphorical persona, and they call her Liz.
Liz.
Now, Liz is not a real person. She is an archetype. She represents the ultimate apex performer, the queen bee.
The ultimate player.
Exactly. Liz is the perfect vehicle for this because her entire ecosystem, what the text calls her queendom, is built around status, control, attention, and admiration.
Right.
In Liz's world, people are never merely making passive choices. They are performing.
Right, like every public move, every seemingly casual comment, every single Instagram, is a highly curated message designed to shape what other people believe.
Yes, because if you can control what the room believes about you, well, you control what the room does next.
Okay, so let's lay the groundwork here. To understand this Lizian game, the text establishes a fundamental rule.
The golden rule.
Right, and that rule is public behavior is never just behavior, it is information.
Always.
And that information is being constantly broadcast across two overlapping arenas, the social arena and the political arena.
Now, on the surface, those two environments seem entirely distinct. I mean, the social arena is your daily life.
Yeah, dating apps, family dinners.
Exactly. The toxic group chats, the workplace popularity contests, and the resources people are fighting for in that arena are affection, trust, belonging, social proof.
Right.
But the political arena, conversely, involves elections, campaign trails, legislative coalitions, lobbying firms.
And the resources there are tangible power, right? Like votes, public office, donor money, institutional legitimacy. I gotta be honest, I was initially pretty skeptical of grouping these two together.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like, how is a high school cafeteria clique anything like a closed-door congressional negotiation?
I mean, they look different.
Totally. But the text makes a really compelling argument that the underlying mechanics are perfectly identical.
They are.
Like, think about a breakfast table with a tight-knit friend group deciding who to invite to an exclusive weekend trip.
Yeah.
Now think about a smoke-filled room of party bosses deciding who gets a political nomination. The questions driving the decisions are exactly the same.
Who is loyal?
Yes. Who brings us the most leverage? Who is a liability? And most brutally, who can be sacrificed to protect the core group?
Exactly. The math doesn't change just because the stakes go from weekend plans to legislative policy.
No, it really doesn't.
So to truly map this out, We have to look at the players on the board, and the obvious ones are pretty easy to spot.
Right, you have the queen bee,
Yeah.
the apex player who demands control and an agenda-setting power.
Yep. You have the rivals, who are constantly probing for weakness, seeking replacement and recognition.
And then you have the followers, which, by the way, the text somewhat menacingly refers to as morsels.
Morsels, yeah, that's a brutal term.
Seriously. But they attach themselves to the apex player because they want protection and borrowed status.
And finally, you have the outsiders, constantly knocking on the glass, looking for entry.
But see, those are just the pieces we can see. This is where the research completely reframes the board.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the true game, the text argues, is actually dictated by the hidden players.
This is the mind-blowing part.
Right. You think the game is just between you and the person sitting across from you, but there are invisible forces altering the gravity of every single move.
Let's talk about the first one, the silent audience.
The lurkers.
Exactly. In any digital space, and frankly in many physical spaces too, the vast majority of people never speak.
No, they just watch.
Right. They never comment, they rarely intervene, they might not even like a post, but their presence totally shapes the incentives of everyone who does speak.
Yeah, because in the Lysian framework, the crowd is not the background. The crowd is the currency.
Yes. When two rivals argue on a timeline or in a break room, they aren't actually trying to convince each other. Never.
They are performing for the silent audience. You are constantly acting based on the imagined judgment of the people who are quietly observing.
Which introduces this incredible chilling effect. You aren't optimizing your behavior for the truth. You're optimizing it for the spectator's approval.
Right.
And speaking of invisible forces, we have to talk about algorithms.
Oh, yeah.
Because the text literally treats them as non-human players.
Because they possess their own incentive structures. I mean, algorithms fundamentally alter the math of human interaction.
How so?
Well, human beings are neurologically wired to pay attention to sudden movement, loud noises, and social threats. It's how we survived in the wild.
Sure.
Algorithms figured this out. So they reward outrage. They bury nuance because nuance takes time to process. And time spent thinking is time not spent scrolling.
Wow.
So the algorithm decides what feels urgent. If you are playing the game in a digital arena, you are forced to adopt extreme polarizing postures just to ensure your signal isn't suppressed by the non-human player managing the board. That makes total sense. And then you also have unwritten norms, which the text describes as like invisible enforcers.
Yes, the unwritten rules.
These are the rules that don't exist on paper but carry the death penalty in social circles.
Like, don't date your friend's ex.
Right. Or always support the party nominee, even if you absolutely hate them. These norms allow a group to punish a dissenting player without ever needing an official judge or jury.
The collective enforces the boundary automatically.
But the most profound hidden player identified in the text is what they call the internal coalition.
This is such a fascinating concept.
It really stopped me in my tracks. Because wait, so I'm not just playing a game against my coworkers, my family, or my dating app matches. I'm playing a game against myself.
Yeah, you are.
Like, the text frames the human mind as a boardroom where one executive wants attention, another demands safety, and a third is screaming for revenge. Are we really that fractured?
Well, modern psychology and behavioral economics strongly suggest we are. Even a single player contains multiple competing subpersonalities or drives.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Think about being asked to speak at a major conference.
Okay.
One part of you, the ego, desperately wants the status of being the center of attention. It wants the applause.
Sure, of course.
But another part, the self-preservation instinct, or imposter syndrome, is terrified of the vulnerability and exposure. It just wants to hide.
Right, the anxiety kicks in.
And then another part might be calculating the networking opportunities. If we connect this to the bigger picture, optimal play in the external world is completely impossible until you have built a stable internal coalition.
Because if your internal boardroom is at war, your external signals are going to be a chaotic mess.
Exactly.
Like if you want the promotion but you are terrified of the responsibility, you will subconsciously self-sabotage your interview.
Yep.
You have to know which part of you is actually holding the steering wheel before you make a move.
Precisely. And this leads us to the mechanism of how these players, once their internal coalitions are somewhat aligned, actually communicate on the board. Because in Liz's queendom, players rarely just come out and tell the unvarnished truth.
Right.
The risks of total honesty are way too high. Instead, they rely on the mechanics of signaling.
Right. Let's define this because it is central to everything. The Lysian rule of signaling states that every move is both an action and a message.
Yes.
A signal is any behavior deliberately meant to change what others believe about your hidden qualities. Your confidence, your loyalty, your intelligence, your wealth.
But the text draws a massive, bright red line between two types of signals: cheap signals and costly signals.
This distinction is so vital because we live in a world of profound information asymmetry.
We really do.
You never truly know what is inside someone else's head. You don't know if a friend genuinely likes you, if a politician actually cares about a policy, or if an apology is sincere.
Right.
So if everyone is constantly projecting a curated image, how do you verify reality? You have to look at the cost.
Walk us through the difference there.
Well, actually, why don't you walk us through it? Let's start with cheap signals.
Sure. A cheap signal is exactly what it sounds like. It costs the sender nothing to produce. A private compliment is a cheap signal. A brand releasing a PR statement saying they care about the environment is a cheap signal. Saying we should totally grab coffee sometime is a cheap signal.
Because you don't actually have to follow through.
Exactly. Because they require no sacrifice, no risk, and no binding commitment. They carry virtually zero reliable information about the sender's true intentions.
But a costly signal burns actual resources.
Yes, a costly signal requires the sender to take on measurable risk. Let's look at corporate behavior again.
Okay.
A PR statement about diversity is cheap, but tying 20% of the CEO's annual cash bonus to specific, verifiable diversity hiring metrics is a costly signal. It burns financial leverage.
Right, there are real consequences.
In politics, a public endorsement of a highly controversial, unpopular candidate is a costly signal because it actively risks your own reputation and donor base.
And in romance, I guess, committing to an exclusive relationship is a costly signal because you are mathematically sacrificing all your other potential romantic options.
Precisely. In a world driven by incomplete information, cost is the only currency of truth. If a signal doesn't cost the sender something, time, money, reputation, or optionality, you should assume it is a bluff.
This brings me back to the dating app scenario we started with. The text highlights modern dating apps as the ultimate hyper-accelerated signaling game.
Oh, absolutely.
Like delaying a text message for 4 hours isn't just you being forgetful, it is a strategic signal of desirability.
It's deliberate.
Yeah, it is a way of broadcasting the message. My attention is a scarce resource. I have a vibrant life and other options. I am not desperate. You are artificially manufacturing scarcity to increase your perceived market value.
It's basic supply and demand applied to human attention. If your attention is always available, its perceived value drops to zero.
But, I mean, doesn't that just make you look like a manipulative jerk? If you manufacture false scarcity, aren't you just playing childish games?
Well, that is the exact risk the text warns about. If you play false scarcity and the other person calls your bluff, the consequences are disastrous.
That happens then.
Imagine you take 2 days to reply to someone to seem aloof and highly desired. But you aren't actually highly desired, you're just sitting at home watching TV.
Right, yeah.
If the other person simply shrugs and unmatches you, or just stops texting back entirely, your false scarcity has resulted in your own elimination.
Ouch.
You risked looking insecure and overly calculating, and you lost the connection. You have to balance the need to signal high value with the risk of the other player simply walking away from the table.
And we see this exact same mechanic scaled up in politics with the concept of strategic ambiguity.
Yes.
Like a politician standing on a debate stage being asked a direct yes or no question about a controversial law will almost always give a broad, meandering 5-minute answer that essentially says nothing.
It drives voters crazy.
It really does. But mathematically, they are doing the exact same thing as the dater taking 12 hours to text back.
Yeah. They are avoiding clarity to preserve option value. A politician rarely wants to give a hard yes or no because clarity alienates someone.
Right.
If you take a definitive stance, you instantly lose the coalition of voters who hold the opposite view. By remaining intentionally hard to read, by using strategic ambiguity, they keep multiple swing groups projecting their own hopes onto the candidate.
So ambiguity creates flexibility.
Exactly. It allows you to survive another day without burning bridges.
But the text also notes that the strategy has a half-life. Too much ambiguity over too long a period creates a total vacuum of trust.
It does.
If you never commit, if you never send a costly signal, people eventually stop investing their own resources in you, which brings up the inevitable collision point. Bluffing.
Yes.
If everyone knows that everyone else is signaling, and everyone knows that everyone else is using strategic ambiguity, how does anyone...
The bluff must be believable based on your past behavior, and it must be extremely costly for your opponent to challenge.
Give us an example of that.
Let's take a labor negotiation. A union leader tells management, if you don't increase wages by 10%, our workers will strike indefinitely, and it will bankrupt the company.
Okay, that's a massive bluff.
Huge. They are projecting way more solidarity and financial runway than they likely actually have. But for management to call that bluff, they have to risk shutting down their factories.
Right. If the union is telling the truth, calling the bluff costs the company millions.
Exactly.
But what if the union is lying?
Well, if management calls the bluff and the workers cross the picket line the very next day because they can't afford to miss a paycheck, the union leader doesn't just lose the 10% raise. They lose everything.
Because everyone sees they were lying.
A failed bluff is catastrophically expensive because it reveals your fundamental lack of leverage. It proves your signals are cheap. You destroy your future credibility, meaning you can never bluff that opponent again.
Man, because signaling and ambiguity are so incredibly delicate, players are constantly faced with this, existential dilemma.
Yeah.
As a player, do I try to crush all my rivals so that my signal is the only one the room can hear? Or do I team up with them to amplify our collective signal? This is the paradox of competition versus cooperation. In the text's words, to eat or be eaten.
And the source material dives very deeply into the tension between these two drives.
Let's look at competition first.
Competition is the optimal rational mode when three conditions are present. Visibility is scarce, status is strictly relative, or the architecture of the game dictates that only one person can actually win.
Like a primary election, or a debate stage, or a reality TV show where there's only one prize.
Exactly. In those zero-sum environments, the text is ruthless. It says you do not share the spotlight. You own it.
Wow.
Any resources you give to your opponent directly reduce your chances of survival.
But you can't own the spotlight forever without a supporting cast. I mean, a king without subjects is just a guy alone in a room.
Which is where the text introduces a highly mature strategic pivot. It references the Lysian 2025 reflection.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause here. The Lysian 2025 reflection. We just hit a wall of dense lore.
Yeah, we did.
For the listener who isn't steeped in the exact fictional history of this Liz persona, what does that actually mean?
It's a conceptual milestone in the research.
Mm-hmm.
The authors track the evolution of this Liz archetype. In her early phases, Liz is pure aggression dominating rivals, demanding all the attention, destroying anyone who threatens her status.
Just eating everyone.
Right. But the 2025 reflection represents a simulated maturation of the player. It is the realization that unchecked consumption is ultimately self-sabotage.
Okay.
The specific quote from the text is, if you eat everything, you ruin the feast.
So if you destroy all your rivals, you have no one to push against. If you demand all the attention constantly, the audience gets exhausted and leaves.
Exactly.
Dominance without sustainability collapses the entire ecosystem.
Precisely. Therefore, in the mature phase of the game, cooperation is not viewed as the opposite of competition. It is viewed as a highly sophisticated tool for long-term survival.
That makes a lot of sense.
You cooperate when gains repeat. When building trust today creates exponential value tomorrow. When the goal requires a coalition, like passing a law or maintaining a lifelong family dynamic, you literally cannot win alone.
But the text issues a massive warning about something called fragile cooperation. It argues that a lot of what we call teamwork is actually just delayed exploitation.
Yes. Think of a typical office environment. Let's say we have two middle managers, Mark and Sarah.
Okay, Mark and Sarah.
They are on the same marketing team. For 2 years, they practice perfect cooperation. They cover for each other when one is late, they CC each other on important emails to ensure shared visibility, and they routinely ally to push back against a terrible vice president.
So to the rest of the company, Mark and Sarah are a united front. It looks like genuine friendship.
But then the terrible vice president quits. And suddenly, there's only one open VP slot. Exactly. The environment instantly shifts from a cooperative game to a zero-sum competitive game. And the speed at which their cooperation shatters is breathtaking.
Because the shared enemy has vanished.
And the new scarcity is credit. Suddenly, Sarah stops CCing Mark on emails to the CEO. Mark starts slightly undermining Sarah's data during a team meeting.
Yikes.
They are using the intimate knowledge they gained during their cooperation phase as ammunition in their competition phase.
That is so dark, but so incredibly recognizable. It highlights that cooperation isn't necessarily about morality or being a, good person.
No, it's really not.
It's often just power preservation. It's like two massive pop divas sharing a stage for a duet.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Like, they might secretly despise each other. They might be fighting for the exact same demographic of fans. But if they fight publicly, the concert is ruined and the audience demands a refund. They share the stage because the shared financial gain of the box office far exceeds the individual ego gain of a backstage brawl.
That is the perfect synthesis of the concept. Cooperation in this realm is deeply strategic, rarely sentimental. Rivals become temporary allies when coordination is mathematically or socially required to block a worst-case scenario.
So you share the stage not out of love, but out of leverage.
Yeah, got it.
But sharing a stage or trying to steal the spotlight from the other diva involves immense danger. Every single move has a potential backlash.
Huge backlash.
Let's examine the specific risks players must absorb to secure their ultimate payoff. And in Liz's queendom, the ultimate currency, the absolute gold standard of this entire economy is attention.
But before you can capture attention, you have to navigate a minefield of multidimensional risks.
Right. The text outlines 4 major categories.
First, reputation risk. How will this specific move permanently alter how future players perceive my reliability?
Okay.
Second, rejection risk. What if my bid for a romantic connection, a political alliance, or a promotion is flatly denied, leaving me visibly diminished?
That's a scary one.
Very. Third, exposure risk. What if my hidden motives, the fact that I actually don't care about the charity I'm promoting but just want the tax write-off, are revealed?
And fourth, coordination risk. This one is huge. The text spends a lot of time on it.
It really does.
Coordination risk is the danger of making a bold move, assuming people will follow you, and looking behind you to find an empty room.
The text uses the concept of the spoiler effect in electoral politics to explain this mathematically.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine a scenario where 60% of voters strongly prefer a reform agenda and 40% support the status quo incumbent.
Okay, so the reformers have the clear majority.
They do. But if that 60% splits their support evenly across 2 very similar reform candidates, say 30% to candidate A and 30% to candidate B, they suffer a massive coordination failure.
Oh, I see.
The incumbent wins with 40%. The majority ends up electing their least preferred choice simply because they couldn't communicate and align on a single focal point.
That makes perfect sense. And we see that exact same coordination risk in a high school clique or a tight-knit friend group.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's say a toxic dynamic has been brewing for months. One person in the group is a bully. You decide you are going to be the brave one. You take a stand, you call out the toxic behavior in the group chat, and you demand a change.
It's a bold move.
Right. And the potential reward is massive. I mean, you gain loyalty credit, you become the new moral center of the group, and you eliminate a threat.
But the risk is terrifying. What if you misread the room?
Yeah.
What if the other members of the group are too scared to back you up?
Yeah.
They leave you on read, nobody chimes in to support you.
That is the worst feeling.
Suddenly, you don't look like a brave reformer. You look messy, dramatic, and isolated. You are permanently marked as a disruptive force, and the group slowly exiles you to maintain their fragile peace.
Right. They just push you out. To navigate these terrifying risks, the text provides a formula that I am calling the Lizian master equation. It is how Apex players calculate their actual worth on the board. Power equals attention, multiplied by credibility, multiplied by coalition, multiplied by leverage.
It is a brilliant, unforgiving formula because if any one of those variables is 0, the entire equation equals 0.
Literally 0.
Think about it. Liz, without attention, is unseen. She cannot play the game if she isn't on the board.
Right.
Liz without credibility is merely noise. She might have a megaphone, but the audience knows her signals are cheap, so they don't believe her.
Okay.
Liz, without a coalition, is isolated. She has no enforcers, no allies to amplify her norms, and Liz, without leverage, is purely decorative. She might be universally loved and incredibly popular, but she lacks the mechanism to force anyone to change their behavior.
Let me push back on a distinction the text makes here, because I think a lot of people conflate these terms.
Sure, go ahead.
The text says people constantly confuse attention with power. But look at modern culture. If an influencer has 50 million followers looking at their daily vlog, or a politician is dominating every single cable news cycle with outrageous statements, isn't that power?
Not necessarily.
I mean, isn't commanding the world's eyeballs the ultimate leverage?
It is a common misconception, but the distinction is crucial. Attention simply means people are looking at you. It is a state of passive observation. It is inherently unstable and fleeting.
Okay.
Power, on the other hand, is the active ability to shape future choices. Attention must be converted.
Converted how? Like, what does that look like?
Well, if you have 50 million eyes on you, but you cannot mobilize that audience to actually buy a physical product, cast a ballot on election day, change a cultural norm, or defend your reputation during a scandal, you do not possess power.
Oh, wow.
You're simply providing free entertainment. You are absorbing all the massive risks of visibility, the exposure, the scrutiny, the inevitable backlash, without capturing the actual reward of control.
So you're the court jester juggling flaming swords. Everyone is watching you. But the king, sitting quietly in the corner, is the one who can actually order the execution.
Exactly. The jester has all the attention. The king holds the leverage.
Knowing these risks and understanding that attention must be converted into leverage, how do Apex players actually maneuver when the stakes are at their highest?
That's the real question.
It's time to examine the specific masterclasses in strategy. The source material provides some incredible historical and social case studies of these mechanics in action.
Let's delve into the political arena first. And it's important to note, we are analyzing this strictly through the lens of game theory, mechanics, coordination, signaling, and framing, without validating any specific political ideology.
Yes, absolutely. We're looking at this purely as a math problem.
The text highlights the year 2000 U.S. presidential election in Florida as the ultimate agonizing case study in the strategic voting game we discussed earlier.
Okay, let's break that down.
The dilemma in Florida centered on plurality, winner-take-all voting rules. If you were a voter whose ideology aligned with a third-party candidate, you faced an excruciating internal coalition battle.
Because you want to vote for who you actually believe in.
Exactly. A sincere vote for that third party is a powerful psychological payoff. It expresses your pure identity, it signals your values, it builds long-term movement visibility.
Sure.
However, the game theory risk is profound. If enough voters prioritize pure self-expression over strategic coordination, they siphon votes away from the major candidate who most closely aligns with their views.
Right.
In a race decided by a few hundred votes, a lack of coordination mathematically hands the victory to the candidate those voters collectively like the least.
Wow, it really forces the player into a brutal trade-off. Like, do I prioritize ideological purity, knowing it might cause the worst-case scenario, or do I compromise my values to ensure viability?
It is the ultimate test of the internal coalition.
It really is. Another amazing historical example the text unpacks is the 1960 Kennedy-Nixon debate. This is a masterclass in signaling strength and understanding the medium of the board.
It totally is. Prior to 1960, presidential debates were largely consumed via radio or print transcripts.
Right, you couldn't see them.
In those mediums, you could win a debate purely through rigorous policy facts, rhetorical structure, and logical arguments. The audience was processing auditory and intellectual data.
Okay.
But television fundamentally changed the payoff medium. It introduced visual processing. And the human brain is wired to process visual cues of threat, health, and authority milliseconds before it processes the logic of spoken words.
And this is where the neurology meets the game theory. Nixon had been hospitalized, he refused theatrical makeup, he wore a suit that blended into the background, and he was visibly sweating under the studio lights.
Exactly.
Kennedy, meanwhile, was rested, tanned, wore a high-contrast suit, and looked directly into the camera.
Precisely. While Nixon may have been reciting optimal, mathematically sound policy, the television audience's brains were reacting to his physical discomfort as a primal, costly signal of weakness.
Wow.
The radio listeners, who were only processing the auditory signals, largely thought Nixon won or tied the debate, but the television viewers overwhelmingly thought Kennedy dominated.
That is wild.
The text summarizes this phenomenon with a brilliant phrase. The room sees before it reasons.
The room sees before it reasons.
Oh.
I love that. If your visual signal contradicts your verbal signal, the audience will believe their eyes every time.
Every single time.
So moving from signaling to coalition building, the text uses the 2010 UK coalition government as a prime example. You had the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats forming a joint government.
Right.
And these were bitter rivals with fundamentally different voter bases and opposing ideologies.
But the architecture of the game forced their hands.
How so?
The election resulted in a hung parliament. Neither party had enough parliamentary seats to govern alone. The mathematics demanded cooperation. Rivals were forced to become partners.
Wow.
But the text defines this dynamic beautifully as cooperation under mutual suspicion. To achieve any legislative leverage, everyone had to accept less than they wanted in order to get more than they could alone.
But the risks were deeply asymmetrical there. The Conservative Party gained stability and the Prime Minister's office. The Liberal Democrats, however, took a massive existential risk.
They did. By entering the coalition, the Liberal Democrats gained unprecedented access to actual executive power. But in doing so, they had to compromise on key campaign promises, most notably regarding university tuition fees.
Oh, that's a big one.
It triggered a massive backlash. They risked completely alienating their purist supporters who viewed the compromise not as strategic governance, but as a total betrayal of their identity.
It is the eternal trap.
Mm-hmm.
Do you share the throne, dilute your brand, and look like a sellout to your core fans? Or do you keep your purity, refuse to compromise, and stay out in the cold without any actual power?
It's so hard.
We see this exact same tension regarding narrative management in modern digital culture, specifically with the phenomenon of influencer apologies.
Ah, yes, the modern digital crisis.
Yeah.
The strategy of controlled vulnerability.
Right. An influencer gets caught in a massive scandal. Old tweets surface or a business deal is exposed as a scam. The game instantly shifts.
Completely.
It is no longer about proving they did the right thing. It is entirely about narrative repair. So what do? They sit on the floor of their bedroom. They don't wear makeup. They wear an oversized hoodie.
They always had the hoodie.
Always. And they take a deep, shaky sigh into the microphone before speaking. They are deploying controlled vulnerability to disarm the opponents and rebuild parasocial trust.
But it is a razor-thin tightrope. As the Lysian rule states, tiers are only useful if the lighting, timing, and receipts agree. The audience is highly sophisticated. They are constantly scanning for the difference between a genuine emotional breakdown and a calculated performance.
Of course they are.
If the audience senses that the vulnerability is staged, if the lighting is too perfect, if the apology avoids the actual core issue, if it feels monetized, it becomes a catastrophic failed bluff.
Yeah, and it just makes it worse.
The apology video actually extends the lifespan of the scandal because it proves to the audience that the influencer is manipulative.
So, synthesizing all of this, whether you are forming a parliamentary government in the UK, surviving a televised debate, or navigating the treacherous waters of a high school cafeteria, the core strategy is identical.
It really is.
You have to make yourself the coordination point. You have to become the person, the concept, or the energy that everyone else in the room feels mathematically or socially forced to adjust around.
You do. But attempting to become that central focal point, attempting to seize that crown, is incredibly dangerous. The text is very clear that the board is littered with the carcasses of players who tripped over their own ambition.
Let's talk about those failure modes, tripping over the crown. Because when Apex players fail, they rarely fail because they are unintelligent.
No, rarely.
They fail because they misread the underlying incentives of the game.
The first massive failure mode the text identifies is optimizing the wrong metric.
Okay, what does that look like?
This happens when players become obsessed with a visible scoreboard while completely neglecting their actual long-term goal.
Okay.
In the digital realm, this looks like chasing viral engagement, controversy, and raw likes instead of building durable, monetizable trust with a core audience. You go viral for a stunt, but your brand becomes completely toxic.
Right. Or in politics, optimizing the wrong metric is chasing the emotional high of a pure idea. They optimize for the immediate sugar rush of a moral victory on cable news instead of doing the gritty, unglamorous, behind-the-scenes coalition building required to actually pass a law. They become servants of the scoreboard, forgetting what the points are actually for.
That's a perfect way to put it. Now, the second major failure mode is winning the battle but losing the war.
Oh, this is a classic.
This occurs when a player wins the immediate short-term exchange, but does so by deploying tactics that permanently damage the broader ecosystem or their future position within it.
Give me a scenario.
Imagine a politician who wins a tight election by utilizing incredibly extreme, scorched earth, polarizing rhetoric. They demonize half the population. They win the battle. They get the office.
Right.
But they have made the country so divided, so cynical, and so distrustful of institutions that it becomes completely ungovernable. They won the office, but they destroyed the leverage of the office.
I've totally seen this happen in social settings, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like you get into a heated argument with a friend in front of your entire social circle.
Yeah.
You are losing the debate, so you go nuclear.
You bring up the secrets.
Exactly. You ruthlessly expose their deepest, most humiliating secret in front of everyone. You destroy their argument. You win the battle. The friend runs away crying.
Right.
But you lost the war. Because everyone else sitting in that living room just watched you weaponize vulnerability. They realize you are fundamentally dangerous.
Yeah, they see what you're capable of.
So over the next 6 months, they slowly, quietly stop inviting you to things. You won the argument, but you engineered your own isolation.
Exactly. You proved you are capable of disproportionate retaliation, which breaks the fundamental trust required for any future cooperation. No one will form an alliance with someone who might nuke the entire board if they get angry.
The text provides a fascinating hypothetical scenario regarding failure modes, specifically about escaping a toxic group chat.
Oh, this is a great one.
Let's say I'm trapped in an ongoing group chat that is full of drama, manipulators, and constant negativity. It's draining my energy.
Right.
If I want to leave, my ego, my internal coalition screams at me to leave publicly. I want to draft a massive multi-paragraph text calling everyone out on their behavior, drop the mic, and hit leave group.
The dramatic exit.
Exactly. It feels like a massive, empowering win. But the game theory in the text says that is an escalation trap. The text argues that leaving quietly, without a word, or just slowly making my responses incredibly boring, is actually the winning move.
This introduces one of the most compelling concepts from the source material. They call it the exit strategy, or the anti-game school.
The anti-game school.
Yes. Sometimes engaging in the game, even if your goal is to win the argument, means you are implicitly accepting the toxic rules of the arena. The provocateur or the bully in that group chat thrives on friction. They want an audience. They want a narrative. They want you to react.
It's true.
If you blow up and send that massive paragraph, you are giving them exactly what they want. A dramatic reaction that they can dissect and mock after you leave.
I have to disagree with the text on this one, or at least challenge it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Doesn't leaving quietly just signal submission? Doesn't it allow the bullies in the chat to control the narrative of why you left?
I see what you mean.
Like they can just say, oh, they couldn't handle the truth, or they were being too sensitive. If I just fade away, I feel like I'm letting them win the framing war.
That is the natural instinct, but let's deconstruct the bully's incentive structure. What is their payoff?
Attention.
Their payoff is attention and emotional control. If you argue with them, you validate their power over your emotions. The anti-game school argues that the most devastating strategic move is not always crushing your opponent with a better argument.
Then what is it?
Sometimes the most powerful move is denying them the pleasure of mattering to you. The text puts it brilliantly. Silence denies escalation.
Because you literally give them zero new information to work with.
Exactly. By making yourself completely boring, by exiting quietly without a grand declaration, you refuse to be a piece on their board.
Right.
You starve them of their required resource, which is friction. They might try to spin a narrative after you leave, but without your active participation, the drama quickly fizzles out. You protect your peace, which, in the specific context of a toxic environment, is the ultimate and only viable payoff.
Okay, that makes sense. You win by changing the definition of the prize. But if the game is this perilous across all these arenas, if winning the battle can mean losing the war, if trying to be the center of attention can lead to your downfall, and if sometimes the best move is to refuse to play entirely, how do we actually define what optimal play is?
To answer that, the source material synthesizes 12 different schools of thought on strategy.
You had 12.
Yes. It covers everything from rational optimization to evolutionary behavior, systems thinking, and narrative mechanics.
Okay.
And the overarching conclusion is incredibly liberating. There is no single best strategy in a vacuum. Optimal play depends entirely on your specific defined goal.
Let's break a few of these down. According to the text, if your primary goal is survival, let's say you are a new employee in a highly political, cutthroat corporate office, the optimal play is the evolutionary strategy.
Right.
Patience, gathering information, mimicking the behavior of the survivors, and avoiding unnecessary exposure.
Conversely, if your goal is domination, if you are launching a hostile takeover or running an insurgent political campaign, you need the ruthless competitive strategy.
Meaning you just go on the attack.
You must aggressively control the narrative, create incredibly sharp contrast between you and the incumbent, and visibly publicly punish betrayal to enforce a strict hierarchy.
But then the text introduces a totally different framework if your goal is profit. It says you need systems thinking and narrative strategy. You have to convert raw attention into habitual loyalty.
Yes.
And here's where I need you to translate something for me. The text uses a highly specific phrase here. It says you have to use the Hadbuck's logic from Liz's Pink Album phase.
Oh,
We are back into the deep lore. What on earth is a Hadbuck, and what does a Pink Album have to do with game theory?
it is a great metaphor used by the researchers. In the lore of this Liz persona, she went through different eras. The Pink Album phase represents a period where she transitioned from just being a performer seeking attention to building an absolute cult-like economic ecosystem.
Okay, so a massive shift.
Hadbucks is a playful term for a proprietary emotional currency. The logic is this. You don't just sell a product. You monetize a parasocial relationship.
Interesting.
You make the consumption of your persona a daily habit, an emotional crutch, and an indulgent identity marker for your followers. Optimal play for profit isn't about the best product. It's about making the audience feel like they're investing in a shared identity.
Wow. Okay, so
Yep.
it's the transition from capturing eyeballs to capturing the identity of the consumer.
Exactly.
And finally, what if your goal is justice?
If your goal is justice, the text argues you must combine the ethical strategy with deep coalition building. Justice is the hardest goal to achieve because it requires systemic rewiring.
Like actual structural change.
Right. It requires proportional punishment, protecting vulnerable players, and sacrificing your own short-term gains for long-term structural change. The text warns that true justice is not the sugar rush of moral outrage on the internet.
So no angry tweets.
Tweeting a furious hashtag is a cheap signal. Doing the grueling, boring work of changing the laws, changing the unwritten norms, and building a coalition of unlikely allies is the costly signal required for actual justice.
This all sounds incredibly comprehensive, but I have a major pushback against trying to utilize this entire framework.
Let's hear it.
If a player actually tries to implement all these different schools, if I am reading incentives like a cold, rational economist on Monday, adapting to chaos on Tuesday, punishing a rival like a ruthless power broker on Wednesday, and then trying to build a long-term ethical coalition on Thursday, don't I just become an erratic, chaotic mess?
It does sound like a lot.
Right. The text explicitly states earlier that if no one can predict your behavior, no one can trust you. How do you play all these styles without looking like a sociopath?
That is the ultimate tension of the entire framework. And it leads us directly to the final Lizian synthesis.
Okay.
The absolute best Apex players do not just flip randomly between these 12 schools like channels on a television. They integrate them into a singular, dynamic, and highly calibrated posture.
What is?
The text defines this master posture as selective competition plus credible cooperation.
Selective competition plus credible cooperation. Break that down for the listener.
It means you are fiercely competitive regarding your boundaries. You compete for attention, for your identity, and for bargaining power. You make it abundantly clear that you will not let yourself be ignored, steamrolled, or exploited.
Like you stand your ground.
You establish that your retaliation for betrayal will be swift. But simultaneously, you cooperate deeply and reliably to build durability. You build coalitions by sharing credit.
Ah, so you do work with people.
You keep your promises, making your cooperation highly credible. When you do punish a betrayal, you do it proportionally, not hysterically. So the room knows you are governed by logic, not emotion.
So it's very calculated.
You learn to read the underlying incentives of the room so accurately that you don't just react to the pieces on the board. You control the board itself. You learn the exact moment to charm, the exact moment to strike, and crucially, the exact moment to disappear.
Okay, this has been an absolute journey. This framework is staggeringly deep. We started this hour by saying the game board isn't just confined to a table, it's everywhere.
It's all around us.
And after walking through this, I feel like I'm seeing the neon grid lines overlaid on every single interaction I have, from my inbox to the news cycle to my family text thread.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Liz's queendom, I want to distill what this vast architecture of game theory means for you, the listener, as you navigate your everyday life.
The core takeaway from this research is a radical reframing of how social gravity actually works. We are taught a fairy tale about meritocracy.
We are. We are taught that popularity, influence, and power naturally flow to the most deserving. We are taught that the smartest person in the room gets the promotion.
Right.
That the prettiest or most charming person gets the relationship. that the most morally pure candidate wins the election. But the text proves that is a complete myth.
It really is. Power is a strategic equilibrium. The room does not naturally crown the best player based on objective metrics.
Well,
The room crowns the player that everyone else starts reacting to. It crowns the coordination point.
and you must remember that every single move you make is actively altering that equilibrium, whether you intend it to or not.
Every single move.
A text message left unread for 2 hours is a signal. A vote cast strategically for a lesser evil is a signal. An apology given with just the right amount of controlled vulnerability is a signal. And a silence maintained when everyone else around you is gossiping is a massive, costly signal. You are constantly broadcasting information that changes the incentives, the fears, and the desires of the people around you. You cannot opt out of the game.
You are always playing.
So I want to leave you with a final thought. A provocation to mull over the next time you find yourself navigating a messy friend group dynamic, swiping through profiles on a dating app, walking into a tense, highly political office meeting, or watching a televised debate.
That's a great question.
If your choices in friendships, your moves in romance, and your political loyalties are constantly being shaped, filtered, and constrained by the invisible gravity of status, the primal fear of exclusion, and the deep, hardwired human desire to belong, how much of your authentic self is actually real?
Right.
And how much of it is just a highly optimized subconscious survival strategy designed to withstand social pressure?
Is the ultimate Lysian question. When the layers of performance are peeled back, who is actually making the move?
Think about that the next time you walk into a room, because the board isn't just sitting on the table. The board is everywhere. And it is always your turn. Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.